Welcome back to another Rockler demo. Today I'm going to show you how to make a segmented bowl like this using some new jigs from Rockler that make the miter cutting process easier. It'll add some eye-catching geometry to your wood turning, and it's a great way to use up scraps. Segmented bowls are made of stacks of these glued up rings, and varying the diameter of the rings and the width of the segments is what gives you the rough proportions for your bowl blank. But the challenge to making these rings, as you might guess, is cutting these miter angles so they're right on the money. If this miter angle is off even slightly, it compounds around the ring and prevents the final joint from closing properly. And that's a big problem because you don't want a gap like this to show up in your segmented pattern. But here's the good news. These perfect miter setup blocks from Rockler can help you dial in those miter angles more accurately, and you don't have to do any math either. The kit includes these 3 hard plastic blocks that'll cut miter angles on polygons with anywhere from 4 up to 12 sides. Now my bowl uses octagonal rings, so I'll be using the block marked for 8 sides. To set your miter gauge to the correct angle, fit the block's notch over the miter gauge bar and swivel the fence until it touches the block's 2 contact points evenly. Tighten the fence to lock the setting. It's as simple as that. Now I'm all set to cut the 8-sided rings for my bowl blank, and I didn't have to calculate the miter angles. I did, however, have to figure out the lengths of the segments for each of the 6 rings of my bowl. But there are free online calculators specifically designed for segmented bowl turning that can help, and that's what I used. All you need to know is the diameter of the ring you want to make and the number of sides. So I made my largest ring 10 inches in diameter and my smallest ring 7.5 inches and varied the diameters by a ½ an inch from there. So 8 inches, 8.5, 9, and 9.5. And I made my segment wall thickness 2 inches. Once I knew the lengths of the segments, I could go ahead and cut 8 of them for each ring, 4 from maple and 4 from walnut. I used a step-off block in the rip fence to set the lengths for each segment. Remember to keep focused and cut carefully when working this close to the blade. When you're getting ready to glue and clamp these segments into rings, it's helpful to be able to hold them together temporarily during that process, and masking tape makes it easy. Just stick the long edges of the segments down on a strip of inverted tape so their mitered corners touch. Then apply glue to both mitered edges of each joint and carefully roll the segments up into a ring. To close the joints evenly, I'm using large automotive-type hose clamps. Tighten the clamps securely and pound any uneven joints flat as needed with a dead blow mallet before the glue begins to set. When these rings come out of the clamps, there are probably still going to be some slightly uneven joints, but you want these rings to be as smooth as possible so there won't be gaps when you stack them up. So, I touched up each ring lightly at my stationary belt sander to flatten it. But if you don't have one, you could also do this sanding manually by mounting a couple sheets of sandpaper to a flat surface with spray adhesive. Here I've stacked my 6 rings together to determine what I want the pattern of this bowl to be. And what I've decided to go with is this spiraling pattern of maple and walnut segments that you can see. And to help me get things lined up, I first marked the center lines on each of the maple segments, and I also marked the perimeter of each of the rings on the larger ring below it to help me determine where I could put glue and where I didn't need to put the glue. And once I had the pattern established, I marked a black dot on each of the rings to help me quickly get this thing all put back together again once the glue is applied, because there's a lot that has to happen in a short amount of time before the glue sets up, and anything that you can do to make things easier during the glue up stage is always helpful. With that prep work done, I could spread glue on the contact faces of the rings and arrange them into a stack. From there, I set the blank into a shop-made clamping press. It's just 3/4 inch plywood, all thread, and some nuts and knobs, and tighten down the press to squeeze the rings together. Give the glue a bit of time to tack up before tightening the press, so the parts won't slide around under pressure. The last part I still need for this bowl blank is a bottom. And for that, I'm going to use this piece of walnut. And I've glued a thick piece of poplar onto the back of it And that's actually going to serve as the attachment point for the faceplate of my lathe. So I'm going to glue my bottom pedal on and then clamp the assembly back up in the press. When the glue dried, I screwed the faceplate to the blank. And now comes the fun part, turning it. Be sure to wear a face mask and a respirator, as I'm going to do. I started by roughing the outside of the bowl to shape with my bowl gouge. Since all of the segments are edge grain, rather than a mix of edge and end grain, the wood cuts particularly easily and smoothly. I had plenty of material thickness at the top of the blank to work with, so I decided on a closed form shape for this bowl. I'm really liking the organic orb shape of this bowl with its closed rim. So I think I'm about done shaping the exterior, and now it's time to turn to the interior. Here again, once all the hard, flat facets were smoothed into a curve, shaping the bowl's interior went pretty smoothly. I started with a bowl gouge for the roughing work, then switched to a wide, heavy, curved scraper to smooth the interior. I thinned the walls of my bowl down to about 5/16 of an inch thick and stopped frequently to check wall thickness with an inside-outside calipers. I also kept a close eye on the bowl's overall depth. When the walls were uniform and to my liking, I gave the whole bowl a final sanding up through the grits to 220. And the last machining step is to turn the bowl around to shape its foot. And to do that, I've removed the faceplate and I've mounted the bowl in this shop-made Longworth chuck. I've got my tailstock equipped with a free-spinning Jacobs chuck pressed up against the bottom of the bowl for added support. First, I cut away the poplar mounting surface, leaving just a nub to support the tailstock. Then I shaped the actual foot with a slight recess before removing the tailstock and turning away the nub. And that wraps up the turning process, and this bowl is ready for finish. Segmented bowls are a style of wood turning that can be wonderfully artistic and complex. This is a simple example, but I hope it at least helps you understand the basic process. And these perfect miter setup blocks sure made the initial cutting stages easier. So for something different, give segmented bowls a try. I'm Chris Marshall with Woodworkers Journal magazine, and thanks for watching.